Welcome to First Thought, a podcast by Galway International Arts Festival. I'm Tiernan Henry, host of the festival's Vinyl Hours. Vinyl Hours is a series of conversations with artists and creatives, tracing a musical journey through the soundtracks of their lives. Tom Waits, who we'll hear from again shortly, reckons that songs are really just interesting things to be doing with the air. And here in Vinyl Hours, we think talking about them isn't too shabby either, even if it is only bravado. You can listen to the full playlist on Galway International Arts Festival Spotify page. And if you like what you hear, please consider making a donation to Galway International Arts Festival, a non-profit organisation bringing the arts to people in Ireland and around the world. Head to giaf.ie and click Donate. Today's guest is the Director of the Arts Council, Maureen Kennelly. She has a huge amount of experience in the Irish arts sector. She was Director of the Mountains to Sea DLR Book Festival, of the Courage International Festival of Literature in Galway, Curator of the All-Ireland Performing Arts Conferences in Belfast and Derry, Director of the Kilkenny Arts Festival and Artistic Director of the Mermaid. She also worked with Fishamble New Writing Theatre, with Druid, and was with Poetry Ireland before taking up her current position with the Arts Council. And of course, what's probably most important is she's a Kerry woman. But for today, we're here to talk about some of the music that moves her. Without further ado, enjoy Vinyl Hours with Maureen Kennelly. Maureen, thanks for agreeing to do this. It's great to have you here.
Delighted to do it. I'm always happy to talk about music.
Great. Listen, what you've sent us is a fascinating, distinctive list. It's a real invitation to hear what you hear, I guess, in all of these tunes and songs. And for everyone listening in, remember, you can hear all of the music on Maureen's playlist on the Galway International Arts Festival's Spotify page. So I think maybe we just jump straight in with your first choice. And as I said, when you sent me the list, your choices, I thought, okay, this is a serious player we're talking about here. So your first choice is from the only full-length record made by Mary Margaret O'Hara. Miss America is a jarring noir masterpiece. It's probably a fellow traveller to Tom Waits' Swordfish Trombones. And in it, O'Hara's breakdown of language and unsteady presence drags you in and along with her. So Maureen chose Year in Song from the album. And when you listen to the track, what we hear again and again and again is Mary Margaret O'Hara singing "The aim is joy, the aim is joy," which is an invitation, I suppose, and it's an order, an incantation or a mantra. So Maureen, tell us about Mary Margaret O'Hara and this song in particular.
Yeah, as you said, it's an incantation. It's, you know, an invitation to be joyous, to be joyful, which is always a welcome thing in anybody's life, of course. I came across her first. I lived in New York for a year from 1990 to 91. I didn't know her before that. I had the good fortune to meet two fantastic women, Paula Hermoso and Kathy Maguire, and they were great music aficionados. It's funny, you mentioned Swordfish Trombones. I was a huge Tom Waits fan by the time I met them. And I think, yeah, when I was invited to do this by Paul Fahey, I have spent the last 2 weeks just tussling with like lists and, you know, like
I know, yeah,
jumping up the list and going, oh, Jesus, no, I can't ignore that. My God, you know, so, I mean, it's been fantastic. I've loved doing it. So to arrive at a list today of 7 or 8 has been hard, but extremely enjoyable, I have to say. But in any case, these great friends of mine, Paula Hermoso and Kathy Maguire, took me to St. Anne's Warehouse in Brooklyn, which of course is a venue that is very connected to Galway International Arts Festival. And that's like your home away from home, I guess, at this stage. But back then it was in a very groovy church in Brooklyn. And there I saw Mary Margaret O'Hara. And
oh, wow. Right.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm exercising major bragging rights now, saying
that no, that's really cool. Yeah.
That I've actually seen her.
Yeah.
So and I was just absolutely blown away. I mean, and Paul and Kathy knew her work well. As I said, they were ahead of me in the music stakes, and she was just, I mean, it just took the top off your head basically, seeing her. And then I was lucky enough to see her later again. Do you remember Hal Kilmer, I think, isn't it? The Canadian.
Hal Wilmer. Yeah, he did all of those.
Kilmer.
He curated these really interesting shows. Yeah.
So it was Came So Far for Beauty. So it was the Leonard Cohen,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Dublin Theatre Festival presented it, and that's probably back to something like 2010 or 2011
Yeah. Yeah.
in the point, I'm pretty sure. And she was part of that, and it was stunning lineup. Anthony and the Johnsons and all sorts of amazing people. So, but she was there again. So that was, I feel kind of lucky that, because really she doesn't get out much.
No.
So, as you said, that there's only the one record.
Yeah.
But I guess this year in particular, because I want to mention that my friend Paula unfortunately passed away this year, just a few months ago. And she was just a very great influence on my life, full stop, but also in terms of music. So she and I would have gone to see the Pixies in New York, and Martin Stevenson and the Dainties. And,
oh my God! Right.
Yeah. And it's so funny. Earlier this year, I read a book by a writer who's new to me, Lily King, who's this brilliant American novelist, and she was blurbed by Anne Patchett and Elizabeth Strout, who are two people I love. So you kind of feel, okay, I'm probably in sure hands here.
Yeah.
Sure enough, I was. But it's gas. Lily King in the book goes through the books that she loves, and when she name checked various books, I was going, oh my God, Shirley Hazard.
Read that.
I'm bound to love all of these. And then in terms of music, she talked about a choral version of Misunderstood Angel by Cowboy Junkies, and I was thinking, oh my God, it just took me right back, because Paul was a huge Cowboy Junkies fan. So it's just, I'm sure, like for you and for so many other people, like it's literally is that soundtrack of your life. So that soundtrack of 1990 into 1991, a magical year in my life, and that has stayed with me. And I suppose because of that friendship, particularly with Paula, and Paula was from Rotherham in Yorkshire, so lived in Sheffield for quite a bit, so was very infused with all that kind of northern sound, and I know she has passed on that love of music to her lovely husband and two lovely kids, Archie and Monty, and to Richard, her husband. They're all huge music fans now as well. So that's one of the many, many good things she's passed on to them.
Yeah, and I think music is, aside from kind of fixing us in a place or a time, I think one of the other good things is, particularly say with friends, like you said, and or anyone who is connected to you. If there's a musical connection, I think as well, that just it seems to just burnish it, I think, and I think there's this lovely mix of sadness and happiness when you hear that a song or an artist that you associate with a particular person, because it brings an awful lot back. But I think as well, what it does is it not only the sadness, but I think as well it's the joy, the shared joy of that shared experience of being in the room with someone, watching someone sing, or someone saying, oh, you have to hear this, and
that's it. Like it's transcendence, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is taking you somewhere else, so like I will never forget that experience of sitting in Brooklyn with those two women who were very special to me, and hearing extremely special music. Like that's just it's like little epiphanies going off in your head, really.
Exactly. I suppose this is one of the great joys about music, is that it can be so visceral, that it can hit us on so many levels. It can be literally a kind of a gut punch, and you can have that almost physical reaction to it, as well as, having a perfectly intellectual reaction to it as well. Yeah. And you can do that at exactly the same time. You can appreciate the art and the quality of the art, and still going, oh my God, this thing just makes me want to dance, makes me want to cry, makes me want to sing, or whatever,
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Another band that we loved were the Sundays, and like, I love the Sundays. I find it hard to listen to the Sundays now. That makes me extremely sad about Paula. But still, I know I'll come back to them. But it's just that transportation. It's
one of the things that I really like about Mary Margaret O'Hara, it's aside from the family that she's from, her sister's a really great actress as well. But she creates these gorgeous landscapes of sound. And it reminds me in a way of like what Kieran Carson wrote about, I go back to this quite a bit, about framing the landscape of Irish tunes, that he had this idea that he could conjure up maps or guides, so that when you're playing a tune, there isn't necessarily only one way of playing it, and it creates. Good artists have maps in their head, mental maps of how to get in and out of a tune, and I think your second choice sort of moves us in that kind of direction. It's not so much a song or even a tune. It's like a suite of tunes, and it's like a landscape. It's like a total landscape, and it's Martin Hayes and Dennis Cahill, or Cahill, I think, because he's an American, so I'm very careful about that. Martin Hayes and Dennis Cahill have put together this seamless set of 11 tunes that reflect, I suppose, how they wanted to deconstruct and distill and eliminate what you thought or what we thought of what Irish music could be about, and I suppose where those things could take the listener. And the version you've chosen is from their live album, Live in Seattle. So tell us about this one, Maureen.
Martin, who has become a friend of mine, I'm very fortunate to say, because I've worked with him a good bit down the years. So I first came across him when I was director of Kilkenny Arts Festival and programmed himself and Dennis into the magical surrounds of St. Canice's Cathedral. So, and Martin, it's, as lots of people know, is hilarious. Like, he's very, very articulate, and he's just such a fantastic sense of humor. But he said, lots of people call that live in Seattle. So, when you're in the business that we are of, like, writing things to entice people to come to gigs, and you're coming up with all sorts of hyperbole, and I'm always accused of using, very, very positive and far too many adjectives about things. But I remember writing the blurb for Martin and Dennis and talking about weaving their magic, and then seeing them in St. Canice's Cathedral and talk about transcendence. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And, watching the most spontaneous standing ovation I think that I've ever witnessed. And like the piece that you played is this 27-minute sequence and starts with Port na Buckie, which is like extraordinarily spectral and sad. And then I love what you've said about Kieran Carson, just that map, just that landscape that you go through. Like, it's just extraordinary. So that you do come out after the 27 minutes actually feeling changed. It's funny, thinking about another Northern Irish poet, Paul Muldoon, has talked about a poem being a force field, and that when you go through it, you should come out feeling changed, or Raymond Carver talks about something shifts within you, and again, it's that idea of epiphany. And I think you can't not listen to that 27 minutes or so much more of their music, of Martin and Dennis, without feeling absolutely changed in some way, and changed each time. And there it is, it's available to you every minute of the day. I mean, that's a phenomenal resource that you can reach that part of yourself by saying, listen, I'll just flick on that CD now and have a little listen. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to have at our disposal.
It's astonishing, and I think you're right. I mean, trying to distill this down and say, how do you describe this? Well, it's 11 tunes that are kind of stuck together, but you're right. I mean, they just invite you in, and then they take you all over the place. And I think what's really nice about this, I think, is that there's this lovely invitation into it. It's very warm and opening, and they allow you into the music with them. And if you're prepared, I think, as you say, if you're prepared to go with it, it just takes you to the most extraordinary places. And what's great about this, I think, when people are listening back, you really need to, almost stick your headphones on and go for a walk with this. What I did yesterday, I walked to Spiddle yesterday. I live close to Spiddle, so I walked up to Spiddle with this. And you kind of think, I know I'm going to keep walking for a bit longer because I need to keep listening to this and keep listening to it, because it does create this astonishing landscape, and what it evokes, I think, there's so many different emotions it evokes, everything from joy to, extreme sadness. And I think what's brilliant as well in this is the reaction of the audience. You can hear a pin drop at times, and then they'll play a sequence of notes and the audience just opens up, and then they'll take you again into this really quiet place. So it's just an astonishing piece of work, isn't it?
No, and that's exactly what you say. Like, you can witness, you can see people's hearts and minds opening up. That's absolutely phenomenal stuff.
Yeah. And as you say, we've this great facility, to do this and to listen to it anytime we want. We can just put on the headphones or, turn up the sound really loud and listen to it. And I think what's really interesting as well is there's lots of hints of other things in it, because I swear there's a bit of Martha by Tom Waits for about 2 or 3 bars towards the end. I was thinking, that's Martha. And as I was thinking about it, it was gone, and it's just a small figure that Dennis plays on the guitar. And I was kind of thinking, no, that is definitely Mark, but it's gone, But you think there must be so many other little figures in there as well, that that people are picking up on, or that spark something else in your head. And you think there's, isn't that a great joy of music,
That's it. And I mean, Martin, as you say, is just influenced by so many things, and he's the furthest thing from a musical elitist you could get, all sorts of notes of classical and jazz in there. And somebody that he has worked with a lot, whom I had the opportunity to see in a mind-bending gig in Mississippi, was Bill Frisell, the jazz guitar.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Again, it reminded me I remember going to see Louis Stewart when I was very young, when I first moved to Dublin, and remember upstairs in J.J. Smith's used to be these fantastic jazz gigs. Like, I haven't chosen jazz today, but I'm a huge jazz fan.
Yeah.
And just that feeling again of, wow, I've moved into a different world here, whatever has happened. But that gig with Bill Frisell was in Mississippi. It was just unbelievably phenomenal. Yeah. And of course, I had to go and say hello at the end and Martin Hayes is a friend of mine, and so make those connections. But I saw Martin and Dennis do a gig with Brooklyn Rider in Kilkenny about 5 years ago. Again, it's just that moment in your mind where you go, wow, I've actually been moved somewhere else. This is phenomenal.
Yeah. You feel like you're invited into this community, and you become part of a community that, you almost have we have these secret signs, that, you can go to a gig in Mississippi and go, just to let you know, I'm a friend of this guy, or, or you get picked up, you pick up something with someone and then you realize, it's like you're mentioning about the author, you realize, oh yeah, I've read those books. Those are my books as well. And that's my music as well. So it is this great, wonderful, continually moving and shifting and shaping community to be part of, isn't it?
This is it, exactly. And the more you amass through your life, the more those connections become clear to you. So it's even more exciting, because you're just delving deeper all the time and seeing those connections. It's thrilling.
And I suppose we just talk a little bit of, you grew up in Kerry, and I grew up on the East Coast, and our availability to be exposed to lots of different music was, much, much more limited. I mean, to me, we had a little bit of TV, so we had the Old Grey Whistle Test and Top the Pops. But mostly I was getting music through my friends and my friends' older siblings and my older siblings as well. I mean, where was your exposure?
Very similar. I am the youngest of 7 children, so my older siblings were really influential in my exposure to music. And so when I was growing up in North Kerry in the late 80s, Pat Kenny was presenting the Outside Track, I think it was called, on Radio 1.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you BP Fallon as well. So those were the 2 big things. We were very much in RTE land. We didn't have the Grey Whistle Test. We'd been very NCU now. So that, those were the main channels through which we were getting our music. But my sister still has this fantastic yellow version of Bob Dylan's songs. She's a huge doorstep of a book. So, just to covet that, she'd give me sneaky looks at it. And they loved Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, but I had one brother, Eamon, who was a big jazz fan, so Nina Simone was big. Holiday. They were. Steely Dan was they were big fans of Steely Dan. Joni Mitchell, of course, Leonard Cohen. All the amazing.
Really Catholic taste and really Catholic stuff,
it was great. But at the time, going to Ballybunion, which was 10 miles away, was the big hotspot. So that's where you went for your kind of sweaty Saturday nights.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, thinking back on it now, it's hilarious because I saw Something Happens and Mary Coughlin and Hot House Flowers there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just a place to go on a Saturday night and have a few pints and,
Yeah. Yeah.
hang out. But like when you think back on it now, you think, God, those were really well programmed, and I certainly wouldn't have thought of that like as a Whelan's or a Debarra's or whatever,
Yeah.
but actually this place, the Atlantic, was actually bringing pretty cool bands, so
Yeah.
I like seeing Mary Coughlin. That was amazing. Like, God, I fell in love with her music. I thought, Jesus, Tired and Emotional was still a favorite album. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a real note of my teenage years.
And I mean, I know you were writing poetry, but did you ever want to sing though? I mean, did you ever want to be up on stage, fronting a band?
Yeah, I did, very definitely. And I thought I could sing. And I remember my sister one day, like, sort of advising me otherwise, and me being quite shocked and thinking, wow. And then it's weirdly, don't know what, something strange that I started to do then was to sing a version of The Banks. Is it My Own Lovely Lee?
Yeah.
What's the actual name of the song? Yeah. Um, anyway, the Cork song,
Yeah. I only know it as My Own Lovely Lee.
My Own Lovely Lee, isn't it? Yeah. And kind of channeling like a scat style of singing, like Mark with a bit of Lisa O'Neill thrown in. So that was kind of my party piece. This is in response to my sister saying, "No, you definitely can't sing." But yeah, I certainly always wanted to sing, and I suppose I still have ambitions in that area. But the thing for us was playing the tin whistle and learning, Bach's Air and a G string, or the intermezzo, or Schubert's Trout Quintet. Like extraordinary, really, when you think about it. Like that, we had a music teacher who wanted to teach us via those. Those classical pieces. But you can imagine 30 people in the class all
tooting away,
Tooting away, exactly. Yeah. But I guess it's something like that I'm passionate about now. When I think about sort of primary school teachers and indeed secondary school teachers and how they're taught about the arts, we've so much work to do there, which is not to say there are brilliant teachers out there who teach music and the other art forms. But like, it's an area that in the Arts Council we are doing more work in, and we will do lots more work in terms of saying, how can the arts and education work together? Like, if I'd had a musician or a singer in the classroom, then it would have been a hugely important development for me. So there's so much we can do in that area, and there's lots of exciting work to be done.
I mean, I agree with you. And like the school I went to, there was no music. We didn't do music. So at primary school we did, but the secondary school, that wasn't on the curriculum. And then my sister was in a school, or the girls' school next door, and they did do music, and but it was kind of hammered into them as well, So, and I think there's so much opportunity there. I think you're dead right. I think when you think about how we were hearing music and art and being introduced to art as sort of teenagers through friends and siblings and so on, you kind of think we're so receptive at that time, and if you're brought along on this kind of, or introduced into these musical places or other artistic places at that age, I think it just opens up so much for you. Because I know I certainly, when I moved to Dublin when I was 17 or whatever, 18, whenever I went to college, I mean, I couldn't wait to go. And I was thinking about this. It's not that I wanted to get away from home. It's what I wanted to do is I wanted to be living by myself, or, away from, I didn't want to get away from my parents or friends or siblings. But what I wanted to get to Dublin, because Dublin had galleries, Dublin had gigs, Dublin had music shops and so on, and the college that I was supposed to be going to as well.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Yeah.
Right, we'll go on to your next choice. It's Niamh Regan is a Galway native who released her debut album last year. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. Temet, I think, is how you pronounce it.
It's the name of the town in Texas, I think, that her husband hails from.
Ah, right. There you go. I didn't know that. And one of the great things I like about this album is that there's so many hints of great voices, and you can hear lots of influence in there. But it's her writing and her singing and her playing as well, and the arrangements of the material. Like it puts her in the kind of same classes like Waxahachie or This Is the Kit or Weather Station or something like that. And she just seems to be, well, she is part of this great new Irish female explosion
Yeah.
of bands and singers that just, not to denigrate, because I think, those in previous generations, we had really good Irish singers, I felt, that who came from the folk tradition or the ballad tradition, or the kind of traditional rock, what we would have thought. But what we're seeing now is the influences are just all over the place, and they're melding and being blended together, and the music is just astonishing.
Oh, I
So
think she just seems to have come fully formed.
yeah,
I think she's astonishing. I'd heard a little bit about her, but I must give credit to my colleague Joe Stewart, who works with
mm,
communications. Joe is a huge music man, so it was Joe led me then
yeah,
particularly to her, and oh my God, I have this on repeat. Like I think
yeah,
it's just there's something just so rich and lush and very mature, and I think she's probably only in her late 20s up
exactly.
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's complicated music in places, but it's very It's not off putting. You just think it's so well done. And one of the things that I really like about it is how much piano's in it.
Yeah.
That it's not just a guitar based album, which I have no problem with. But I kind of just think, just the love, that sound of a piano as the lead instrument in a track.
Yeah, and I mean the lyrics, and I heard her speak recently on RT. She just sounds like a terrific person as
Yeah,
well. And I feel so bad for her because the album came out just at the start of lockdown, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Around, yeah. So I mean, can you imagine how many gigs
I
she'd
know.
have done
Yeah,
by this stage? But look,
yeah.
she has a tour I think planned for later in the year, and God, you just urge people to go and see her.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see her live.
And you picked Ode to Youth. And is there any particular reason this track or
I found it hard to choose. I love every single one of them, to be honest with
mm,
you. But yeah, it's there's just a particular time when I was listening back to it, and I suppose I thought there was just something just a little bit different to my other tracks.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
that's yeah. But I could have chosen any of the eight or nine.
yeah.
Um, but it's exactly like you say, Tiernan, that she is part of just this explosion. So we'll be talking about Lisa Hannigan a bit, but
Mm,
like Judy Feeney is somebody else I adore. Alva Reddy, Denise Chyla, Tolu McKay, who's I just love that version of N17 she did. I
yeah.
think that's extraordinary. She has an album coming out later in the year that's going to be brilliant. Lisa O'Neill. I mean,
I know.
Cat.
Once you start, you go, oh, don't
Exactly.
forget, and don't
Yeah,
forget,
yeah,
and don't forget.
exactly,
You know?
exactly. When you talk
Yeah,
about sisters of cheekers, like it's brilliant
yeah,
because
yeah,
like there's no doubt. Okay, the playing field in terms of gender across the art forms has been uneven. We
yeah,
all know that there are historical imbalances, but like I think in music it's probably just particularly hard, really.
yeah.
Particularly kind of rock or pop or whatever we want to call it. So it's brilliant to see young female artists now being supported and coming through in such numbers, such
Yeah.
quality.
One thing I think is great as well, and I mean, it's probably a little bit of a bounce from the COVID thing as well, but an awful lot of these, the new female and new male artists as well, I suppose, they're not coming kind of the traditional route with the big record company. These are self-released, an awful lot of them, and which kind of this groundswell of, it's like a cottage industry almost of music. And this is the great thing, I suppose, about the internet then, is that you can get your music out to people without having to go through the process of being hired by a big record company or having to go to London and then getting dropped and doing all of that stuff. Because I think what's great about Neve's album is that it was made by a bar, basically in Galway, who formed a record company, and they've put her album out, which is brilliant,
It's phenomenal. So it's brilliant that there's such reach. But I guess the flip side is that we absolutely have to keep an eye on the intellectual property rights of musicians. Like it's a
Oh yeah,
huge,
yeah,
huge issue, So I suppose,
yeah, yeah,
we need to just pay attention to the copyright directive, and like it's just so hard. Like musicians have had to migrate to live performance, and that's why pandemic's been particularly
yeah,
cataclysmic for them.
yeah.
So yeah.
And it really is their bread and butter. That, I mean, I don't know how many copies of the album Neve has sold, but you think you'd need to sell, a couple of 100,000 to rely on it to be, to live off it, I guess. Whereas at least
Yes.
with gigs, as you said, there's all this lost opportunity, but it's an income, and it's a way just of getting music out to people, I suppose. And it is lovely to have the music yourself, but there's something particularly special about being in a room with people, with the musician or a band on stage.
Yeah,
There's just something really special about that.
absolutely.
And the song that you picked, "Ode to Youth," is it's not a drinking song, but drinking is in it, and which is a nice. I'm going to shoehorn a lead into mid-70s Tom Waits, as he described recently. I saw a thing he just put on his website the other day when he was throwing words around like rice in his songs. And The Hardest Saturday Night is his second album, and it came out in 1974. And you've picked New Coat of Paint from this, so. Why Tom Waits, and why this particular brand of Tom Waits?
Yeah, I mean, we earlier mentioned Swordfish Trombones and Frank's Wild Years, and I love everything that Tom Waits does. But I wanted to veer away maybe from the kind of harder, edgier ones, and The Heart of Saturday Night is just like a complete heart warmer, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's unashamedly sentimental, but I mean, it's brilliant. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous song, isn't it? Or sorry, the album's a gorgeous album, and unashamedly heart in his sleeve,
Yeah, completely. And I love just the energy in New Coat of Paint, and I suppose it's just like I can't listen to him without thinking about Edward Hopper. So I suppose Hopper just comes straight into my mind, the minute I start playing this. And I mean, magic. And again, got to see him. Apparently there was an epic gig he did in the Olympia back in 1987 or 88, which
I was
you
there.
were there.
That's one I have on you. So.
Right now. Yeah.
It was on the big time tour. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah.
But got to see him in. Do you remember he came to
was the Phoenix Park? Yeah, in the big tent. Yeah, the Rathskeller or whatever it was. Yeah.
So got to see him then. So that's just life defining in a way, So, but everything he does, and then being horribly parochial about it. The fact that he's married still, I think, to Kathleen Brennan, the tune of Three Origins.
Yes,
makes me very proud being from Kerry.
Yeah, there's a great clip on YouTube you can find. It's from the Late Late, I think, and it must be from about 1983-ish, I think, because he plays the piano, has been drinking, but then I think he plays Johnsburg, Illinois. So it's from around Swordfish Trombones, and he's kind of mumbling, talking to Gay. But Kathleen is sitting in the front row of the audience. And of course, Gay goes over to talk to her, doing the pure Gay Byrne thing. And you think, do you like Ireland? Have you been in Ireland long and all this? And I mean, it's a lovely moment. And they obviously had in the past spent a huge amount of time in Ireland quietly, just driving around, and I presume checking her ancestry and so on. But I kind of just love the notion that it was this couple knocking about, the West Coast.
Can you imagine running into them? Central Station, Tom filling up the gas. That'd be fun.
That fella looks like Tom Waits.
Exactly. Really distinctive. Like I remember when we mentioned Raymond Carver, and knowing that Tom Waits was going to be in Shortcuts and Robert Altman's. Jesus! So there's magic. There's a combination.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting about him as well is like that stuff from the 70s, it instantly you think Hopper, because there's a sort of throwback feel, sort of, to this New York. It's a kind of New York feel, sort of late 50s, even though it's from the 70s. And then, when he shifted with Swordfish Trombones, you could really kind of get a sense it was like he was shifting into Carver territory as well, where everything was being pared right back, There was nothing extraneous in the songs. And if the song or the tune needs to be a minute long, that's how long it was, Exactly. And, they felt like Carver short stories almost, like you were dropped into something that was already happening and you were leaving before it was resolved. So
That's exactly right.
an astonishing fellow,
He is.
So your next choice then is we're coming back to Ireland for your next choice, and it goes back to the theme you're talking about just a little while ago, about what's going on with Irish music at the moment, and you've picked Saint Sister. So Morgan McIntyre from Belfast and Gemma Doherty from Derry went to Dublin and met in Dublin and formed Saint Sister. And the song that you've chosen is Twin Peaks, and it's from their first album. So once again, Maureen, why this one?
Yeah, I think they're fantastic. I chose Twin Peaks because it reminds me of my friend, the poet Martina Evans, who's one of the funniest and most talented people you'll meet. She frequently gives workshops, often at the West Cork Literary Festival, and she's a huge Twin Peaks fan. And she uses Twin Peaks. She works it into her poetry workshop somehow. These are week-long workshops that she gives that are, I would say, phenomenal. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking about Martina when choosing that one. Again, I could have chosen any of the tracks, and I think they are brilliant. I had the great pleasure of working with two young women, one of whom still there, Elizabeth Mohan in Poetry Ireland, and Rachel both have worked with us in Poetry Ireland for a while. And they're both in their kind of mid to late 20s and huge music fans. So they brought loads of people to my attention, including Saint Sister, because they knew them. They'd both gone to Trinity. So I love the whole idea. Like, they often talk about Sally Rooney as well, who also, by the way, worked with us in Poetry Ireland for a brief bit. Yeah, just have to get that in.
Yeah.
But it just reminds me of that whole cultural explosion that's coming out around Sally and normal people, and wow, look at what we have. This is so brilliant. This, not to be triumphalist, but we're world beaters at lots of this stuff. This is terrific. So Saint Sister, yeah, I came to know them really through Rachel and Elizabeth, and they lived near us. They probably still do, in Parnell Square, and I just think they're so gifted. I haven't heard the new album yet, but I hear it's fantastic.
Yeah, I heard the first track just because it was on the internet. That's all I heard. So, but I think you're right. I think what's really interesting, one thing that's interesting, I suppose, about Ireland is because it's so small, inevitably you're going to run into people at some point, and because the various communities that we move around in are relatively small, it's very easy to start meeting people and to be introduced to people, or to be introduced to, all these various things. And my son is 28, and so he is sending me stuff, so I'm getting these kind of things, and most of which I feel like I'm way out of my depth with. And then every so often he'll send me stuff, and I kind of think, oh no, we have that already. You grew up listening to that, but you've just rediscovered it. And I think one of the things that I really like about what Saint Sister are doing is it's this lovely blend of a kind of, it's almost a bit like what the Cocteau Twins were doing. They create this atmosphere. There's the great melody. There's an atmosphere as well that they create. It's like there's an ethereal sense to it.
Absolutely. Cocteau Twins, which is an excellent reference for them. And their voices just together work so brilliantly.
Yeah. And again, I think it's such a reflection of what's going on in Ireland, I think, as well. And I think you're probably right. You could have picked any number of bands or artists to represent what's going on. But again, for anyone who hasn't heard it, please listen to this stuff. It's such good stuff,
Oh, no, it is. And I love the idea of the city in summer. So, that's
the
idea of kind of lounging about, being kind of, nicely indolent. And I think they bring that forward really, really well.
That's right, yeah. So we've mentioned her already, so let's talk about Lisa Hannigan. And I was thinking about this yesterday. She seems to have been around forever. She just seems to have been there, And it's about 20 years ago that she got started with, or she met Damien Rice and, hooked up and did the recording and the touring with him. And she's been on, on her solo career probably for the last 14 or 15 years, I guess, And you've picked Anna Horish, which is from At Swim, which is the album that was produced. She co-produced it with Aaron Desner from The National. So tell us about this one.
Yeah, I guess I find this very special to me because this is Seamus Heaney's poem, Anna Horish. And Lisa took part in a major event that we produced in Poetry Ireland to remember Seamus Heaney about 6 months after he died. And so she performed this for the first time ever, I think. And she sang it with the brilliant Zoe Conway and John McIntyre. And it was, ethereal. It was sublime. It was a showstopper. It was just gorgeous. I love, like the poem is amazing. So it talks about vowel meadows in it and rich gradient of consonants, and it's just that idea of the words in your mouth being rich and lush and beautiful. And like when you hear her then wrap her voice around them, they're just gorgeous. Like it's almost like food. It's delicious.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this Sappho, the Greek poet Sappho has this phrase, mere air, these words, but delicious to hear. And that's exactly what I think about when I think about Lisa singing this.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a couple of things that for me as well, I think I'm curious as well for you, just do you think poetry works best on the page or best coming out of the mouth on stage?
But it can work, and like somebody would read that poem of Seamus's and think, I'm not sure, could you make a song out of that actually? But actually she proved that she did, Yeah, it varies, and I guess Paul Muldoon is probably the best exemplar of it, of somebody who, writes both lyrics and poems. And Kieran Carson would have played in that arena as well. So some can work extremely well,
I think it's, obviously I know, there's kind of history of people trying to work with the Yeats stuff and, with various levels of success. But I remember donkeys years ago going to a thing in the Abbey, something to do with Peter Fallon's with the gallery press. But I remember Paula Meehan was reading, and it was the first time I'd heard her reading. I'd read her stuff and I really liked her stuff. But when she read it, Jesus, was musical. It was like, I want to say it was like music, but it was almost like dance, which was,
That's incantation, actually, the way she reads. It's just brilliant.
Oh, you just get caught up in it, And I think, I think what Lisa Hannigan did with Anna Horish is something similar. I think it's a very brave thing to do, to take something, particularly say Heaney's work, which, people would know just either from the page or from him, from his recordings, because he was such a good, sayer of his own poems, and it works perfectly as a song, and it you just think, of course, it sounds like a traditional Irish song that's been knocking around for generations. That's what she makes it sound like, and it's effortless the way she delivers it, I think, as well, which is one of the. She's got such a good voice, and it's very understated,
That's it. And she's very understated in person too. She's just a really, really good sound person. It's great to see her have such success.
Yeah, and I think as well, she's a real support to younger artists as well, which is really good as well. I think, that she's bringing people along with her as well, and introducing people as well,
You're right. She's keeping an eye to the next generation for sure.
Yeah. Listen, we'll move on, and we just have a couple of tracks left to talk about, and we're staying in Ireland for the next one, and it's from Kevin Doherty, and a bit like Lisa, he's been knocking around for donkey's years. People would probably know him best from Four Men and a Dog, who he still plays with and still performs with, but he's done a series of his own solo albums, and then he made an album which is the track that you've picked, which is Camden Town. He made an album as Telegraph. The album is called Telegraph, and it's a hard one to find. People will have to go looking for it. What I would recommend you do is go and buy it. Just Google Kevin Doherty, find his website, and just buy Telegraph. That's probably the best thing to do. It's a fascinating, long, rambling song.
Yeah.
Why this one, Maureen, then?
Yeah. And, again, it's back to that kind of languid Dublin feel,
Mm,
and it's just so evocative about, that lovely kind of edgy vibe about it.
mm.
I think Kevin, is one of our unsung heroes in Irish music. The band Telegraph, they're absolutely brilliant. I've seen them live. Again, I suppose I've had the great privilege of working with Kevin. So, and I have the great actor Eleanor Metfin to thank, and Kathy Belton
Right.
for
Yeah.
introducing me to his work. Because I'd have known him a bit from Four Men and a Dog, but like didn't know anything about this other kind of rich trove that he had. And so I've seen him a number of times live. The gigs are amazing. In fact, I brought my friend Colette Bryce, Derry poet, who worked alongside Kevin on a range of gigs that we did in various places to mark the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. So Kevin was like our house band.
Yeah.
But Colette and I went to see him in a gig in this, what's a really curious name. It's off Camden Street, and it's like an old working man's club. It's a
Okay.
great
Yeah.
place. Yeah, it's just like a little jazz venue. And that's the last gig I saw before lockdown. And
All
God,
right. Okay. Yeah.
he has this Telegraph are just this stunning band. They're
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And like people who I've brought to see them live, poets Jerry Smith and Tom McCarthy, I brought them to see him in Leeson Lounge, and they've just been on, wow, how have I never heard of this guy?
Yeah.
But he's as well as being a really talented musician and singer, he's a super songwriter, and he's really a bit of a poet, I think,
Yeah.
And Telegraph, in fact, have another album called Seeing Things, which is named after Heaney, in fact. So he's very influenced by Heaney and
Yeah.
a whole range of other Irish poets.
Yeah, because I mean, you're right. I think one of the things that's what I really like about him as well is that, again, I would have known Four Men and the Dog. Wouldn't have known really any of the names of them, of the guys in the band. And a friend of mine in New York years ago, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, emailed me and said, "Have you heard of this guy Kevin Doherty?" When the first album, when his Strange Weather is his first album, when that came out, I think. And so this guy in New York, who's an American, he's not Irish, had seen him playing it at Levon Helm's place up in Woodstock, and said, "Jesus, this guy's great." So he sent me an email, and I had to go and buy the album. And I'm thinking, why have I never heard of this guy? And then you realize, oh, he's the guy with Four Men and a Dog. And one of the things that I love is that I read an interview then with a piece that Levon Helm had written, obviously a number of years ago. But he'd spent time with Kevin, and he said, and it was about the Telegraph guys, and he just said, "You guys are a real band."
Right.
And, and Kevin was saying, "This is the guy who was in the band telling me that we are a band," And I think there's this brilliant mix of there's folk, there's jazz, there's bits and pieces of everything in there. But just as a storyteller in song, because it's a bit like your last choice as well. His voice is not it's not the strongest voice, but it's really distinctive voice.
Yeah. No, I just
Yeah.
I have this one on repeat.
Yeah.
But Camden Street, yeah, I think just that evocation of the city is just love it.
Yeah. And now your last choice is by Bill Callahan. So he was with Smog for donkey's years, and then a bit like Lisa, he had kind of one existence and then another existence. So he was, I suppose, Smog, and then I didn't realize. I actually checked this. He's done 7 solo albums. I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, Bill Callahan's got a couple of solo albums, but he's 7 solo albums. And you've picked a track from Dream River, and the track you picked is Javelin on Landing. So Bill Callahan?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge Richard Ford fan, and there's a visual artist called Fiona Murray. I think she's still down in Clare, and she was doing an exhibition with us in the Mermaid Arts Centre. So this is like 13 years ago or so. And Fiona and I were talking about our shared love of Richard Ford, and she said, "You'll have to listen to Bill Callahan." So I have to confess, had never heard from before that, and I can see exactly why she thought, yeah, Bill Callahan, Richard Ford. I can see the connection. But Javelin, it's such an upbeat song, like it's, you know, it's the song to dance around the kitchen to.
Yeah.
But you know, then you talk to various people about Bill Callahan, and I had a great trip with the saxophonist and composer Sean McErlane, and so we were both effusing about Bill Callahan. And at that stage, Bill Callahan was due to play in Ireland, and Sean was going, "Come on, get your skates on, get the tickets," you know. And like it's lovely when you discover just these people whom you admire, and that they all admire him as much as you do. There's something lovely about that. And I was just looking him up in the last few days, because I knew we were going to be talking about him, but to see that he was connected with Joanna Newsom for a bit, which I hadn't known. So
yeah, there's another part of that community as well, you know.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, again, it's all back to everything is connected, and all those influences. I often think about John Bandville's phrase, "Everything you do influences everything you do." So it's just we're always building it up into this lovely tapestry of influences.
Yeah, and I think again it brings you back to the idea that when you meet someone and you realize that you have this kind of common love of something else that may be completely unrelated to the thing you're talking about, and you realize, oh, you like them too. And I think it's always great, because someone will always say, oh, if you like this, you should try this, because you know you got to listen to her, you got to listen to him, you got to listen to this band or whatever. And again, when I was getting ready for this, I was just checking out Callahan. This is just, and it's a nice way to wrap things up, I suppose, as well, is that he said when he recorded the album, when he recorded Dream River, that Javelin on Landing is from, he said he wanted it to sound like the last record you'd want to listen to at the end of the day before you go to bed around midnight. He said he wanted it to be smooth and relaxing, and it's the perfect end to a perfect day. And maybe, Maureen, that's a perfect end to Maureen Kennelly's Final Hours.
Yeah, well, that sounds about right. Yeah. I do tend to play it at midnight. All right. Yeah. So
great, good. Listen, Maureen, you're very good to do this. I really enjoyed it, and I keep saying this to everyone. I have to apologize to you for making you reduce your musical life down to 8 tracks, because it's the one thing I can't do it. John Crumlish, one of John Crumlish's kids, said to me the other day, "Okay, what's your vinyl list?" And I thought, oh God. And I kind of have 1 or 2 tracks, but I can't write them down, because as soon as I write one down, I think of 5 others, you know. So you're very, very good to do this.
Not at all. And the guilt of it. But isn't it phenomenal that you think, you know, 3 years ago, my vinyl list would have been totally different. And
of course,
what's so staggering and what's so energizing is that musicians get up every day and do something entirely new.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. So thank you. It is.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you everyone for listening to Vinyl Hours with Maureen Kennelly on the First Thought podcast. Galway International Arts Festival would like to acknowledge the support of its principal funding agencies, the Arts Council and Fáilte Ireland, Galway 2020 European Capital of Culture, education partner NUI Galway, the festival energy partner Flowgas, and drinks partner Heineken. For more from Galway International Arts Festival, see giaf.ie. I'm Tiernan Henry. See you next time.